Online, good morning as well. We're so glad you're here today. It's nice to see smiling faces. Let's go ahead and read together from Psalm 95. O come, let us sing unto the Lord. Let us make a joyful noise to the rock of our salvation. Let us come before his presence with thanksgiving and make a joyful noise unto him with psalms. For the Lord is a great God and a great King above all gods. In his hands are the deep places of the earth. The strength of the hills is his also. The sea is his, and he made it. And his hands formed the dry land. O come, let us worship and bow down. Let us kneel before the Lord our Maker, for he is our God, and we are the people of his pasture and the sheep of his hand. Amen. Let's go ahead and stand this morning. So we have a new song about the great things of God. Worship our King. Come, let us bow at his feet. He has done great things. See what our Savior has done. See how his love overcomes. He has done great things. He has done great things. And break every chain, oh God, you have done great things. We dance in your freedom, awake and alive. Oh Jesus, our Savior, your name lifted high, oh God, you have done great things. You've been faithful through every storm. You've been faithful forevermore. You have done great things. And I know you will do it again. For your promise is yes and amen. You have done great things. God, you do great things. You conquered the grave. You free every captive and break every chain. Oh God, you have done great things. We dance in your freedom, awake and alive. Oh Jesus, our Savior, your name lifted high. Oh God, you have done great things. Above it all, hallelujah, God, unshakable, hallelujah, you have done great things. Hallelujah, God, above it all, hallelujah, God, unshakable, hallelujah, you have done great things. You conquered the grave. You free every captive and break every chain. Oh God, you have done great things. We dance in your freedom, awake and alive. Oh Jesus, our Savior, your name lifted high. Oh God, you have done great things. You have done great things. God, you do great things. serve a God who does great things. Amen. Let's go ahead and give him a round of applause this morning. Even in the midst of hardship, even in the midst of what seems to be chaos and just anarchy, God is still in control. He still does great things. He's still doing great things. Amen. Overwhelmed by the weight of sin, Jesus is calling. Have you come to the end of yourself? Do you thirst for a drink from the well? Jesus is calling. Hold on to the altar. Your regrets and mistakes. Come today, there's no reason to wait. Jesus is calling. Bring your sorrows and trade them for joy. From the ashes, a new life is born. Jesus is calling. Oh, come to the altar. The Father's arms are open wide. Forgiveness was bought with the precious blood of Jesus Christ. Oh, come to the altar. The Father's arms are open wide. Forgiveness was bought with the precious blood of Jesus Christ. Oh, what a Savior! Isn't He wonderful? Sing hallelujah! Christ is risen. Bow down before Him, for He is Lord of all. Sing hallelujah! Christ is risen. What a Savior! Oh, what a Savior! Isn't He wonderful? Sing hallelujah! Christ is risen. Bow down before Him, for He is Lord of all. Sing hallelujah! Christ is risen. Oh, come to the altar. The Father's arms are open wide. Forgiveness was bought with the precious blood of Jesus Christ. Oh, come to the altar. The Father's arms as you wait for the crown. Tell the world of the treasure you found.
Amen. Thank you, worship team. Thank you guys for worshiping. You can take a seat for a bit. Good morning. It's so good to see you guys. My name is Crosby Keel. I'm the youth director here at Grace Fellowship of Lakewood, and it's my pleasure to welcome you guys this morning to another Sunday service and in person, and some of us online. So again, thank you guys for being here and participating with us and worshiping with us. It's a pleasure to have you. Before we get moving forward in our sermon and just diving into the Word, I just want to throw a few announcements you guys' way, and we'll go from there. So the first is that if you are sitting here with us right now, or if you're joining us online, we'd love for you guys to fill out a communication card. So if you're sitting here in the church, they're in the back of the seats. They're just like these little small square cards, just a little bit of information to know that you are here with us, or online. There's going to be a link that's going to be put into the chat, and you can fill that out and let us know that you are with us this morning. For our kids, our Grace kids, if you missed the 9:15 Sunday school Zoom call, that's okay. You can catch it next week. We'd love to see you guys and your kids participate in worship in that way, and we'd love to see your kids show up there. For the foreseeable future right now, this is going to be kind of our way of worshiping on Sundays. And so with that, we want to encourage you guys to sign up as soon as possible for these Sunday gatherings, so that we can get an idea on who's coming and how many chairs we need to put out, and just kind of figure out who's going to be here. And so we just want to get you guys to do that as early as possible when you know that you can make it, so that we can kind of plan accordingly. So just stay tuned for those links, and stay tuned for when you can hop on our website and do that, because we just want to get a good idea on who's going to be here. After this service at 11:30, we are going to be having our annual meeting, where we're just going to be talking about a few budget things and just be voting on a couple of things. So we'd love to see you participate in a few administrative things here at Grace Fellowship, and just kind of be involved in some of the behind-the-scenes work that's going on here. So if you can attend that in person, great. If not, there's going to be a Zoom link that you can click on, or once you get home, you can find that in your bulletins that has been emailed to you, and you can join us online as well. Our Grace Youth are finally meeting up in person, and that's going to be every Thursday from 7:30 to 8:30. We're just going to be doing a Bible study. We're going through Romans, and we've had our first meeting last week, and it was a blast, and it was super fun to have the youth there and gathering together in person. So I encourage you to, if you're a youth or if you're a student, just to come and join us and partake in that with us. Our Go and Pray event is still going on, and we'd love to have you guys join us in a really important part of worship, and something we see as very critical and crucial here at Grace Fellowship, and that's just praying for our neighborhood and praying for the city around us. And so what that looks like is usually just going out with either yourself or a group of people, and going and just praying for our neighborhoods. And we'd love to see you sign up for some time slots and some dates on that. So there's more information for that in the bulletin. Our backyard Bible clubs are going to be meeting instead of our VBS, which is usually how we do things around here during the summer for our kids and our kids ministry here. But there's a lot of information for that in the bulletin, and I don't want to get too deep into that, but we just want to encourage you to go and look and see how your schedule fits in with the Bible clubs that are going to be meeting this summer, and figure out where you can register and figure out where you can send your kids, and it's going to be super cool. So I really want to encourage you guys to do that, and I'm excited to see how those turn out. So I encourage you, if you got kids and your schedule is kind of already set in stone, go check those out and see what works best for you. Finally, I want to move us into a time of just giving and offering and tithing, and I just want to encourage you that if that is something on your heart this morning, that I encourage you to partake in that. And we believe here at Grace Fellowship that is a very crucial part in how we worship our Savior, and the one who ultimately provides for us is by giving our resources and by giving our finances, especially in this instance. And so I just want to encourage you and put on your heart that if that's something you feel called to do this morning, that you can either do that in the tithing box, which is just in the back of the sanctuary on that black table, or you can do that online through a link in the live stream or on our website. And so we'd love to see you participate in that. And along with that, we have been specifically focusing on a ministry organization through Senegal, and a lot of relief and help has gone through that. And so we want to encourage you, if you want to give in addition to what the church has already been giving, that you can do that as well online. So there's just a separate little link below that screen that you'll see online, and you can do that there. And a little bit more information on the Senegal outreach is going to come up on a video that's going to play after these announcements, and so you'll get a little bit better of a taste on what's going on there. So as we move forward, I just want to pray for us, and then we'll dive into the Word. Father, we are so blessed to be gathering today and gathering in person, and we just thank you for your graciousness, and we thank you for your provision in a time of uncertainty, in a time of unrest. And God, we know that we can only depend on you when it's difficult like this. And we know that you're the only hope in these difficult times. And so we, God, we just pray that you will bestow us with rest and rejuvenation today, and that you will give us provoking thought to take with us, and that you will challenge us in our faith and our spirituality, and God, that you will just be present with us this morning. And so we just want to pray, especially for the tithing and the offering, God, that you will use it to further your kingdom in the most exponential way, and that, God, you will just have your hand over our resources and what we give back to you that you have given us. And so, God, we just thank you for this time together, and we thank you for all that you do in our lives every single day. In your name we pray, amen.
Senegal, the westernmost country in Africa, is home to more than 16 million people who are largely dependent on agriculture, fishing, and tourism. Grace Fellowship is partnering to support churches in Senegal through the Beersheba Project, an agricultural and biblical training ministry, as they organize emergency food aid for Senegalese families who are living in the bush. Due to the risk of COVID-19, most men had to stop working, and many people who regularly send support to their families in villages can no longer do so. Senegal has one rainy season between July and September, during which most planting takes place. The lean period between the end of last year's harvest and the new harvest after rainy season will be very difficult this year due to the global pandemic. This prompted the local church around the Beersheba Project to coordinate food support for about 300 underprivileged households in the bush of Senegal. Thanks for your continued generosity, which will help to distribute monthly supplies of rice, oil, and condiments to sustain these families in need.
Just kind of, there it is, all right. This is kind of, I was like, this is a little bit for, like I could preach without it, but online would not hear me, you know? So anyways, good to see you guys. Good morning. Okay, so here's the thing, like I know some of you are wearing those face masks and like it muffles you and I can't hear you so good, so you gotta like project, you know, when you say good morning to me. You can't like, it's not like before where you could kind of say good morning and I'd hear it. So good morning. Good morning. All right, that's what I thought. I thought you guys were here. It's good to see you guys. I think this is about as full as we're allowed to get, which is awesome. I love to have everybody here. It's good to see you in person. I so much, you know, just everybody put your arms out like this. Go ahead. Online, put your arms out like this. Go big and wide. All right, now here's the thing. So here's my virtual hug. Let's hug each other. All right, here we go. Hug. It's so good to see you guys. All right, sorry, it's the best we can do sometimes, but you know, it is interesting. We've been doing Go and Pray, and you heard Crosby talk about that for a minute. The staff went out this last week and had a blast. We went out and prayed for a bunch of homes on Wednesday and just had a great time. And if you haven't done that, I want to encourage you to do it. It's super easy. It literally is. You just kind of walk down the street and you pray for each house, and the people in it just kind of leave a little flyer saying, hey, we prayed for you, and there's a way for them to send in more prayer requests if they want, that kind of thing. There's a sign up out at the fellowship hall. I want to encourage you guys to do that if at all possible. So that's a great time. I have you heard this phrase before? And you can maybe even finish it for me if you know it, right? Desperate times call for desperate measures, right? Desperate times call for desperate measures. And I suppose that is in some sense true, but I've thought a little bit about this. And I think about desperate times, and I think a lot of the time, desperate times really don't call for desperate measures. I think that's actually kind of one of those things we like to say, you know, kind of like at the end of a football game, we like to think, you know, you're down by 5 points, so field goal won't do it. You're at the 40-yard line. You got to get it in the end zone. There's 8 seconds left. So what do? You throw the Hail Mary pass, right? Desperate times, desperate measures, right? But really, I think most of the time, I think that's kind of an analogy that often doesn't work in real life. It's nice for a game or something like that, but I don't know if that's really true. As a matter of fact, I think desperate times, most of the time, drive us back to doing the basic and fundamental things in life that we should have always been doing. It's one of those things where that things get desperate, and we start to think about the way things ought to be, the things we should have been doing all along, but somehow, somewhere along the way, we kind of forgot. We got distracted by other things. Desperation is more often an emotion, I think, than a description of actual circumstances. I think a lot of times we find ourselves in a difficult situation, and we get desperate not so much because there's no way out or because there's no way for it to be handled or to be overcome, but because we feel the heaviness of it, and our emotional state will become desperate. We'll become panicky. We'll become anxious. And I think a lot of the times that's kind of what we face. But sometimes it's both. Sometimes there really are desperate situations, and obviously they impact our emotional state, our emotional being. You know, I remember when I was 10 years old, the first time I ever really had somebody who was close to me die. And I was 10, and it was my cousin. His name was Robbie. And Robbie was, he was born in September 12th, 1973. I was born September 30th, 1973. So we were really close in age. We were about 18 days apart, and we were exactly 18 days apart. I promise I can do math, basic math. And but I was 10 years old, right? And here's the thing about Robbie that you need to know is Robbie wasn't a normal kid. He was to say he was handicapped is very much an understatement. He was, back then we used the term retarded. And now people don't use that term, but that's what we used back then. And severely, he couldn't feed himself. He couldn't talk. He couldn't do really much of anything. He was born with this significant disability, and that's just who he was. And we loved him dearly. And he spent most of his life was lived in a care facility. And my aunt Debbie, and yes, I said aunt, not aunt, because aunts aren't ants. Repent, all of you who say aunt instead of aunt. All right? My aunt, Debbie, would go visit him all the time. And one time she went and she visited him, and she was spending time with him, and she was leaving, and she got in her car, she started to drive away, and she literally heard the voice of God, like out loud, heard the voice of God say, Debbie, stop. Go back and spend time with Robbie. And so she did. She startled her, but she did. She stopped. She went back and she spent time with Robbie, and the next day he had passed. And I just remember at 10 years old going, I was blown away. I was shocked. You know, at 10, you're kind of trying to figure, Robbie's life was never going to be long on this earth. But still, when it came, there's that moment of I don't know, desperation, right? That moment of grief, that moment of panic, that moment of anxiousness. As a 10-year-old, it was significant, but now as an adult, I look back at my aunt, and I can't imagine the hurt and the sorrow that she was feeling at that time. It's one thing for a cousin, it's another thing for a child. Since that time, I've known many people along the way who have lost children, and it's heart-wrenching. I don't know how else to put it. You can't use words to describe that kind of feeling in all kinds of different situations. It's desperate. And at the time, I couldn't get past my own pain, but as I look back, my own pain was so small compared to what my Aunt Debbie was feeling and imagining. Well, the miracle story we're going to look at today has a similar feel to it. We've been going through these miracles mostly out of the book of Matthew, and today we run into another miracle story, and it's a dad who is on the verge of losing his child. It's a dad who is about to lose his child, and he's desperate. He doesn't know what he's going to do. I mean, can you imagine for a moment, I have 2 kids, I have a daughter and a son, and I can't imagine what it would be to lose one of them. Some of you maybe can. This dad is going to lose his kid, and he's panicking, and he's desperate, and he doesn't know what to do. Mark and Luke give us his name. His name is Jairus, and we know a little bit about him because of the language that's used in the Greek, and he would have been wealthy. He would have been on the board at the synagogue, and he would have been in charge of like the order of worship and possibly the finances, and he was a well-known person in his local synagogue, and he was well respected likely, and he was probably fairly wealthy. This is the man, and yet he found himself in this situation where he was desperate. He was facing what was likely the most significant loss of his life, his daughter. He was a dad. No matter what the situation you are in, if you are a dad, you understand the desperation that this man was feeling. He had tried everything, and he didn't know what he was going to do, and his daughter was about to pass. He was a dad. He would have done anything to save the life of his daughter, 2nd, 3rd, 4th opinions by doctors. He would have spent all the money he had. He would have tried what they said to try. He would have done anything. And the story gets interrupted with a woman who is hemorrhaging, and she'd been hemorrhaging for years. And while the circumstances were different, she was desperate as well. She had been hemorrhaging for 12 years, and that was a significant issue. It wasn't just that aspect, that there was a social aspect of it too. She had been considered unclean. She would have had to stay away from people and crowds. She couldn't touch anybody because they would have been unclean, and they would have had to go through a process. They would have had to leave the other people for like 7 days and go through this process to be declared clean again, just before they could kind of enter back into society, if you will. And so there was this desperation that was happening for this woman as well. She was not only away from her family and friends, but she couldn't have even gone into town. Her bleeding may not have put her at risk of immediate death. But it wasn't a 2-week quarantine or a quarantine of a few months, but a quarantine of 12 years that she was facing. She tried everything she could. But let's stop for a minute. I want you to hear the words that come from the text. And so we're going to listen to Hendricks as he reads us this passage out of Matthew chapter 9.
Saying this, the synagogue leader came and knelt before him and said, "My daughter has just died, but come and put your hands on her, and she will live." Jesus got up and went with him, and so did his disciples. Just then, a woman who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years came up behind him and touched the edge of his cloak. She said to him, if I had only touched his cloak, I will be healed. Jesus turned and saw her. Take heart, daughter, he said. Your faith has healed you. And the woman was healed at that moment. When Jesus entered the synagogue leader's house and said the noisy crowd and the people played pipes, he said, "Go away, the girl is not dead, but asleep." But they laughed at him. After the crowd had been put outside, he went in and took the girl by the hand, and she got up. News of this spread through all the regions.
You had these two people desperate in their faith, desperate circumstances, not knowing what to do, having tried everything. As a matter of fact, in Mark chapter 5, verse 26, it tells us that this woman had spent everything she had. It says this, she had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all she had, yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. She was desperate. Both of these people would have tried anything to fix their problem, and did try anything and everything that they could think of to fix the problem, but couldn't fix it. So they turned to this healer, this guy they'd heard so much about, this guy who had healed other people, and they were desperate, and so they turned to him. And what we could take from this story initially is this: we don't need great faith, we need desperate faith. We don't need great faith, we need desperate faith. A lot of the times we think we need to have this great faith, but as I read scripture and as I think about my own life and I think about many people who I've talked to about different experiences, people don't generally have this great faith. They usually kind of turn to God in this situation of desperateness, right? Like they get desperate and they're like, I've got nothing else. And so in their desperate moment, they turn to God. In their desperate moment, they turn to Jesus. We don't need to have amazing, great, wonderful faith. We don't have to have this track record that we can look back on that shows how great our faith is. We don't need all of that. Here's what we need. We need to realize the desperateness of the situation that we're in and have a desperate faith. Have a desperate faith. Jairus and this woman turned to Jesus when all other options failed. Sometimes you might feel guilty about that, like, oh, I should have turned to Jesus sooner. I should have started, it's really my fault. Or we get in this situation, we make a bad decision, we get in a bad situation, and then we say, I'm going to fix it myself, instead of realizing the desperateness of it, and in that moment saying, I'm going to turn to Jesus in my desperate faith. I don't need to have huge faith. I don't need to have amazing faith. I need to have desperate faith. You might be expecting me to harass you about turning to Jesus sooner, but I'm not going to. I'm not going to lecture you because I might as well look at myself in the mirror, right? Because I've done the same exact thing where I wait until the last moment. I wait until I've exhausted everything else, right? Until I've tried everything else in order to come to Jesus. And I come to Jesus and then I sit there in that moment. I'm like, what an idiot I am, right? You guys ever been there? Okay, nobody, none of you? Just me. I'm the only idiot in the room. Okay, I see how it is. I see how it is. All right, your pride. I'm just telling you. Likely we've all been there, right? We've all been in that situation. We try to fix things. We try to take care of things. And I'm not going to harass you about it because I think that's kind of part of a fallen nature that we exist in, right? We have sin around us and we're sometimes embarrassed by it. At least I'm embarrassed by my own sin, right? I don't really want to tell you about all my sins. I never tell the stories about how bad of a person I am. At least not fully how bad I am, right? Maybe a glimpse here and there just so you know that I'm human too. But the reality is this: we're all in a desperate situation. We need to turn to Jesus. I'm not going to lecture you about it because I don't think that's helpful. What I want to do is I want to suggest this, that if you are in a desperate situation, that's the perfect time to have a desperate faith and to turn to Jesus. I don't care what the situation is. There's nothing wrong with desperate faith. It's sure better than no faith. Amen? Are you desperate? I just want to stop for a second because I asked that question. I go, are you desperate? And I got to be honest, man. I'm overwhelmed right now with what's going on in our world. It overwhelms me constantly. Everywhere I look, I don't remember, there's never been a time in my life that's like 2020, man. It is a weird time in our world. It's a scary time. It's a desperate time in our world. If you're not desperate right at this moment, you might be sitting there thinking, well, my personal life's okay. That's fine. But the world you live in is not okay. It's in a desperate place, in a desperate situation. You ought to be a little bit desperate. Maybe now is the time to turn to Jesus in that moment of desperate faith. There's more, though. Desperate faith is good. It brings us to the foot of the cross to experience the grace and mercy found in the shed blood of Jesus. It brings us to the healing power of the eternal divine Son of God. But I want you to listen to this again. I'm going to read verse 20 and 20 through 22 again. And I want you to listen. It says this, just then a woman who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years came up behind him, that's Jesus, and touched the edge of his cloak. She said to herself, if only I touch his cloak, I will be healed. Jesus turned and saw her. Take heart, my daughter, he said. Your faith has healed you. And the woman was healed at that moment. This woman she was unclean. She was in a perpetual state of uncleanness. It's hard to imagine what that's like in our culture because we don't have kind of the same rules. You know, we don't really talk about ceremonial uncleanness, but we do, I guess in our current context, right? We say like if you're sick, stay home. Really? Are you guys unsure about that? Like, I'm just wondering. If you're sick, stay what? Stay home, right? Don't quarantine yourself. As a matter of fact, somebody this past week called and said, hey, somebody that we know has COVID, and we were in contact, and so they immediately quarantined, right? They had to go get the test, and everything was good, no COVID, but they had to quarantine immediately, right? That's what they had to do. This woman had been doing that for 12 years. That had been her state of being. She couldn't go into town because she might touch somebody that would make them unclean. She couldn't go over for a party with her mom or dad or her brother, her sister, her cousins, whatever. She couldn't go hang out with her friends. All of it was off the table because she would make them unclean simply by being near them and being in their presence. There was no 6-foot rule. There was like a 60-foot rule. She's not allowed around people. 12 years of this. She was desperate. And you can imagine what that would be like. This woman who was unclean, though, in our text, she did a little self-talk. She talked to herself. In case you were wondering if that's normal, we actually find it in the Bible, right? We find it in the Bible. She tells herself in verse 21, if only I touch his cloak, I will be healed. She's talking to herself. She kind of has that moment. She begins to talk to herself. So if you've talked to yourself, you're only as crazy as a woman who hasn't talked to anybody in 12 years. I'm just saying. Take that however you wish. When she finally touched Jesus' cloak, and there would be like these tassels on his cloak, and that's probably what she was going to touch. The Jews would have these 4 different tassels, and they were a reminder to be obedient to the law and all these kinds of things. And that's probably what she was reaching for. She didn't even need to have Jesus touch her or speak to her. She just wanted to touch his cloak. She was desperate, and she thought, I've heard these stories about him. Maybe if I could just reach out and touch the cloak, touch one of these tassels, maybe then I'll be healed. In the other Gospels, what we find in Mark and Luke, we find that Jesus felt this power go out from him. Right? This power goes out. He knew that something had happened, and she had touched him, and she was healed. Jesus didn't tell her to fix her problem and then come to him. She came to Jesus, and he fixed the problem. Let me put it this way. You don't need to clean up to be cleansed by Jesus. You don't need to clean up to be cleansed by Jesus. I love this truth. My grandparents lived on a farm in Wisconsin. I spent a lot of time there as a kid, and it was a blast. It was like a paradise for a kid like me. And all I ever wanted to do was be outside, be in the woods, I'm just going to be honest, shooting guns and, whatever, all that kind of stuff. Riding my three-wheeler. I had a three-wheeler. As a matter of fact, I'm going to show you a picture. This is almost exactly what my three-wheeler looked like. Not that, but there it is, right there. Right? That's almost exactly what my three-wheeler looked like. It was the same year and everything. I looked it up on it. And some of you are going, there's three-wheelers, Like, what is a three? It's like a four-wheeler, but with three wheels. Just in case some of you were wondering. They outlawed them because they were too dangerous. Right? This is true, right? For those of you around, you know this to be true. Like this is what preceded four-wheelers, and the wheel on front, they said it was too tippy, which always blew my mind. They literally made them illegal to sell, brand new, which it blew my mind because I'm like, have you ever ridden a motorcycle? Like, that's even more tippy, I'm just saying. But they didn't outlaw those. Anyway, so that was a three-wheeler that was just like the one that I grew up on, and I would go out and I would ride it, and it would rain, and I loved it when it rained. Because I would get on my three-wheeler, and that thing would be completely black by the time I got back. You know what I'm saying? Like, I wanted to get stuck. It was like, what can I get stuck in? How much mud can I kick up? And some of you are looking at me, you're kind of straight-faced, and this, does this not sound fun to you? Man, you guys need adventure in your life. Right? That was my some of my teenage years was being out on the farm. Like, here's the thing that would happen. I would go and I would be covered with mud, and I would come back to my grandma's house, and what do you think my grandma said to me? Yeah, something like, it was more like, boy, don't you come in this house, right? Because she did not want mud on the floor and the carpet and all these different things. She's like, you're changing in the garage, boy. That was, Jesus is not like grandma. Now you guys are going to think I'm going to throw my grandma under the bus. Only a little bit, okay? I love my grandma dearly. I love her dearly, and she was smart. She wasn't Jesus, so she didn't act like Jesus in this sense. And of course, if Jesus had a house, he might have told me to clean off in the garage too. I don't know. But the point is this, that when you come to Jesus, you don't have to clean off first. He takes care of that. I think so much of the time we look at our life, we look at the situation what we're in, and what we think is this. We think, I got to get cleaned up before I come to Jesus. I got to take care of the sin in my life before I come to Jesus. I got to get rid of this addiction before I come to Jesus. I've got to get rid of this sin problem that I have before I come to Jesus. We think we can fix it, and then we'll come to Jesus all pristine and clean and already ready to go. And can I just tell you something? You can't do it. You could. You wouldn't need Jesus. That's kind of the point, isn't it? You don't need to clean up to be cleansed by Jesus. This woman knew this. She couldn't fix her own problem. She couldn't stop the bleeding. She spent all her money, seen all the doctors. Finally, she comes to Jesus, and he cleanses her. He makes her clean. 12 years. She worked her way through a crowd she wasn't supposed to be in, simply to touch one of the tassels on his garment, hoping and trusting in her desperate faith that he would heal her, and he healed her. How many times do we try to clean up before we come to Jesus? How many times do we try to fix our own problems before we come to Jesus and say, Jesus, I got nothing. Help. In that moment of desperate faith. Both Jairus and this woman were desperate and had desperate faith. They had reached their limit. They had no other options left. So they turned to Jesus. He restored the woman, and he would bring the daughter of Jairus back to life. It says this, and starting in verse 23, and I'll read through verse 26. It says, when Jesus entered the synagogue leader's house and saw the noisy crowd and the people playing pipes, he said, go away. The girl is not dead, but asleep. But they laughed at him. After the crowd had been put outside, he went in and took the girl by the hand, and she got up. News of this spread throughout all the region. You need to understand, this is how a Jewish funeral would work, right? As soon as somebody passed away, they would hire people, professionals, to come in and mourn and lament, kind of on their behalf, in their proxy, if you will. And they would hire them. There would be flute players or pipe players, and they would hire a minimum of two. That would be if you were If you were poor, you hired two. If you had more money, you hired more. It's kind of a really interesting idea, to be honest, when you think about it, because a lot of people have a really hard time expressing grief. And so to hire somebody who can kind of do that on your behalf, it makes a little bit of sense in my mind. This is what they would do, though, and there would be a crowd. So Jairus had done everything he could. He finally goes to Jesus. He says, look, Jesus, my daughter's going to die. Come heal her. And they're coming back. They get there. She's dead. She's already died. It's clear. Matthew makes that clear. Mark makes that clear. Luke makes that clear when they tell this story. She's dead. And Jesus said, go away, all of you people. All you people are hired. All the people who are here mourning. Go away because she's just asleep, right? And what did they do? Did you see it? What did they do? They laughed at him. Ha! Jesus, you're so dumb. They laughed at him. Here's the thing that I want to stop in this moment and look at what's happening, because Jesus is about to do an amazing miracle and people are laughing at him. He comes, he doesn't just simply recognize the truth, he recreates truth. He recreates reality in that moment. The first century people, they were not dumb people. They knew what dead looked like. Probably better than a lot of you do. If you've never, just kind of put this out there, if you've never been up close and personal with, I don't know if you eat meat, but if you eat meat, somebody had to kill that animal. I don't know if you know that or not, right? Like, I don't know if you think King Soopers grows it in their refrigerators or something. They don't. It actually does come from an animal that actually is killed, right? And if you've been hunting or something, you've been up close and personal, or if you've been on a farm where they've had to do something like that, I've certainly been around a lot of that. You understand death in a new way, right? In the first century, they didn't have King Soopers or Safeway or whatever grocery store, Whole Foods, whatever it is that you go to. They didn't have that. They didn't go to the grocery store and pick it up out of the freezer and then bring it home. They had to do it other ways. They were up close and personal. They knew what dead looked like. And this girl was dead. They weren't confused. But here comes Jesus, and he walks into the situation, and he says, believe she's asleep. He recreates reality in that moment. That's an amazing thing. Let that sink in for a second. We serve the divine, eternal Son of God who can recreate reality. But they laughed at him. Church is in this weird spot. Not Grace, but the church, the broader church right now. We've got a culture that, in large part, looks at the church and they kind of laugh at us a little bit. I don't know about you, but I've seen a lot of people, what good do your prayers do? Why bother praying, church? That doesn't do anything. That doesn't matter. They kind of laugh at us. When COVID-19 started being a pandemic, I don't know about you, but I saw tons of little statements online in different places, whether it was in the media or it was on my Facebook or my other social media accounts or wherever it was, in lots of different places. It was kind of looking at the church and go, you guys, you pray, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't do anything. It's useless. It's pointless. That's where Jesus was. He comes into this place in this moment where there's desperation, where there's death, and he's going to heal it, but everybody laughs at him. The church sometimes looks that way because we come to the world and we look at the racial divide in our country. We look at those struggling and suffering from this pandemic, whether it's because of the shutdown or the illness itself or whatever it is. We look at all of these things, and the church comes out and they say, you need Jesus, and they laugh at us. But can I just tell you something? They're the ones who don't understand who Jesus is. Because the God we serve can redefine reality. And in fact, he recreates it. That's the God we serve. They can laugh all they want, but here's the truth. Life is found in Jesus. He is the God of life. Every time we see Jesus raise someone from the dead, whether it's this instance, whether it's Lazarus, every time that happens, here's what we should realize. In the death of Christ is the death of death. It was all a precursor to his own death, which would conquer sin and death. When he died and he resurrected from the dead, he conquered death for eternity. He made it possible for us to live eternally with him. Paul talks about this in 1 Corinthians 15 extensively, and you should take time and read the whole chapter this week. But I want to read a few verses, starting in verse 54, and we'll read verse 54 and 55. And he's talking about what Jesus did in his death and his resurrection, and how that impacts us. And here's what it says. When the perishable, that's this body, right, has been clothed with the imperishable, that's the body we're going to get. And the mortal, that's this body, with immortality, that's the one we're going to get. Then the saying that is written will come true. Death has been swallowed up in victory. Where, O death, is your victory? Where, O death, is your sting? In other words, in the end, Jesus wins. In the end, we have life, not death. In the end, all of this other stuff that's around us, guess what? It goes away. The world can laugh if they want. They can say, John, what good are your prayers? They can look at me and say, what answers do you have? And when I come back and I say, Jesus, to quote the chorus from 1977 or whenever it was, is the answer for the world today. They can laugh if they want. But I have seen Jesus transform lives. And I know he's going to transform the world. Amen? That was an amazing truth, and I got to coax an amen out of you guys. Come on. That was good. That was good. Here's the truth. Desperate faith cries out to the God of life, who restores life, life eternal. If you're not desperate this morning, it's just because you don't recognize your own situation. Because we're all desperate. Because we've all got sin. Because we've all been marred by the fallen world we live in. And the answer is Jesus. He's the God of life. So will you, in your desperate faith, cry out to God, the God of life, who restores life and life eternal this morning? I'm going to take a moment and talk to you just about something important. The state of our country breaks my heart, and I don't always know what to do about it. I look around, I see division, I see vitriol, I see hate, I see all of this stuff. People are mad at police officers and think there's a major problem with use of force. Some think racism is running rampant in our country in all kinds of ways. Still others think that specific incidents are being wrongly reported and understood, while others are being politicized and opportunistically overplayed for political gain. And we look around, we see all of this stuff, people on all sides, they're getting mad and they're getting angry, and it breaks my heart. Of course, we have to throw on top of that an economy that is trying to open back up, a global pandemic, and a very contentious election on the horizon. Life is great. But you know what? It is great. It's great when we find true life in Jesus, because he supersedes all of it. He stands above all of it. Not that it's not real, not that it's not happening, but the truth is it reveals my own desperateness and reminds me that I need to run to Jesus and run to the cross, because the answer to all of it isn't found in whoever's elected next. It isn't found in whatever reforms do or do not happen next. It's found in the person of Jesus, and it's looking forward to the new heavens and the new earth, where there will be justice and peace and grace and kindness and mercy and no more sickness and no more injustice, and all of it will be taken care of because we will serve a just king. Amen? Let's pray. Dear God, you are good and gracious. God, I come to you. I am desperate this morning. I don't have the greatest faith. I don't have the most amazing faith. I just come to you with the desperate faith that I have. God, we come to you with the desperate faith that we have. We cry out to you, God, heal us. Heal our land. Heal our people. Be the God of life. We know you are the God of life. We know that you can redefine, in fact, recreate reality. And maybe, Lord, if nothing else, this will serve to draw many people to you, because so many of us will realize how desperate we truly are. So God, we cry out to the God of life this morning. We cry out for healing, for life eternal. I pray these things in your Son's name, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Let's go ahead and stand this morning as we close our service. Just a reminder that if you're feeling like I can't go to the Father, remember that you're his child. He's called you a child. He's made you pure. He's made you holy. And because of that, we were able to run into his arms. Amen. Lost, but he brought me his love for me. His love them a round of applause this morning for accepting us into his loving family. Father God, as we become Grace Fellowship scattered, as some of us remain scattered, Lord God, I do pray that you will help us to be people that look at our lives truly for what they are and where we are at. Lord, and maybe to confess before you that we are unclean in this moment. God, but Lord, help us to remember that the reality that you can change that reality in an instance. There is no year-long program. There's no amount of money that we need to pay. Something we need to do. God, you've done it all. But Lord, I do pray that we do the thing of getting on our knees before you. Say, God, just search me, change me, heal me, forgive me. Lord, I pray that, Lord, I thank you that you are there in times of desperation, God, but I do pray that we will not make it a desperate situation every time. That we will constantly be evaluating our lives where we're at each moment of every day. And all God's people said, amen. See you next week.